Hello and welcome to another episode in the series podcast of Impact, where we have conversation with people who have been doing an amazing job helping others and sharing their story of how life have made them who they are. Today we have a very special guest with us. She is a holistic life coach and the director for ASNA. Her name is Sophia Nicholls. Hello, Sophia, and welcome to Impact.
Hello, Craig, and thanks very much for inviting me to this wonderful podcast, Impact. I love the title as well.
Yes, it's all about, impact, things that impact us and life. And I'm sure there's lots for us to learn from you. But for the benefit of those who might not know Sophia, who is Sophia? If someone else asks, who is Sophia? Who is Sophia?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, who is Sophia? Well, I started first of all by saying I am a child of God. That's where I always begin because that really impacts the way that I engage with the world. So, yeah, I'm a child of God, and I believe that my purpose in this world is to draw others to Him. And I do that as a mother. I have two young, well, they're not young now. These are two adult boys, married to a wonderful man named Nigel Nicholls. We've been married now just over 30 years. And during the course of my life, I suppose as a youth growing up, I've been heavily involved in faith-based organizations, both in my own church, but also I've also been involved heavily in community work. I've done some work with different charities. And yeah, I suppose if you ask who I am from when I was younger growing up, my first profession was a podiatry. That was my first profession. I qualified as a podiatrist back in the 80s and really enjoyed the course so much so that I went to do further study in physiology. That's one of my favorite subjects, and had a master's in physiology, which then led me into education. And so for over 11 years, I taught at the university, one of the universities on the coast, mainly to paramedical students and also to other podiatry students. During the course of that time, I had my first son, which then changed the trajectory of my life quite significantly. And I had another one after a couple of years. And during that time, I left education, formal education, i.e. teaching in the university, and set up my own practice as a podiatrist. And I did that again for another 11 years. It seems 11 seems to be quite a significant number of years. And I think as a businesswoman, that really sort of, I suppose in a sense, it gave me a number of skills that I had managed to develop during that period. And also still being a mother, and I'll talk a little bit more about my son later on, because that really was, as I said, it did change the trajectory of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a whole lot of information that seems like you have been on a journey, and I don't think you can ever stop being an educator. So you're always a teacher. Once a teacher, always a teacher, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose that's what life is about, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you talk about the younger you and your life, but as a child growing up, what was Sophia like?
Yeah, so that again, a really interesting question. I was thinking about that when I was coming on the podcast, and I think if I go back to my childhood, I grew up with as a sibling. I had four other siblings. I have two sisters, one older, one younger, and two younger brothers. And I remember growing up and really enjoying time together as siblings because we were. Well, people would suggest there were a load of us, but it was like a little tribe, really. We loved doing things together as children. I used to remember particularly, obviously we go to school and what have you, and your parents always tend to have a tendency to dress you up similar. So there was three girls, three of us were very, very close in age, and we sometimes would be dressed up together, or my older sister would be dressed slightly different and my other sister would so I can remember that being bonded together with my sisters and my brothers, simply because that was how we were raised, as my mother very much encouraged us. And I say my mother because later on in our life, my mother was our main carer, shall I say. And in the UK, her mother was also very ill. She had diabetes, so she was looking after her mum and also looking after us. But but a lot of her time was with us as children. I can remember, growing up and writing stories together or writing poems. My mother was a poet. She loves writing, and she also encouraged us to enjoy spending time together with music and poetry. And I think that has really impacted my life as I've moved on, very much so. I adore and love music, and have also been very involved in music as a teenager growing up.
So do you sing or play instrument?
Yeah, so at age, yes, we all sort of were encouraged to play instruments. So piano, and I played the guitar. I think I also learned a little bit of the flute. This is as a child growing up, mind you.
Yeah.
And there were always instruments at home, and we were always singing, always playing instruments, always, putting on pretend plays and that sort of thing. And as I said, my mother used to write songs, and so we would sing her songs. And even just talking about it takes me back to that time. And so as a family, we were very close, and we enjoyed, as I said, music and arts together. And that, I think, has impacted the way that I am. Growing up as a teenager, I very much loved to sing, and joined a choir at, I think it was about age either 17 or 18. You may have heard of it, called the London Adventist Chorale.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was with them for many years until I eventually got married and left London, because it was based in London, but still continued. And also, since getting married, I was very much involved in my church, starting choirs and being in choirs and starting music projects. And music has always been, I think, the bedrock of my life, which is really important, and it still is important to me today.
So you had a musical background, and I take it that I know your sons play music. So was that something that a tradition you carried on in your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about my second son first, and then I go to my first one. So my second son absolutely loves singing. He loves playing. He loves particularly playing the piano, but plays a number of different instruments. He plays saxophone, and he plays. I remember when he was at school, he used to play a bassoon, all sorts of instruments. Again, music is so important, and I think it's because we appreciate the power of music in life to wherever you go in the world, if you are engaged in music, you will always find a network of people who also love music. And I think being raised in a church, music played a major part, as I said, with choirs and what have you. So yeah, he's very much involved in music, singing, leading worship. He's got a wonderful network of young people that are also involved in music. So that's my second son. My first son now, and I'll talk about him again later on. He's a fabulous young man. He's the one who changed the trajectory of my life, because he was born with additional needs. He was born with a condition called Peter's anomaly, which resulted in him actually only having a very small eye in one side, and actually another condition called microphthalmia, which is micro meaning small eyes. We initially thought that was going to be his only disability, i.e. that he would be blind.
Right.
But as he got older, we recognized that he had other additional cognitive challenges, and also sort of autism type conditions associated with his blindness. But music has played a major, major part in our life and in his life, because his communication is very different. He engages with the world very differently to anyone else, as we all do, really. But one of the things that we found for him, because we struggled to really understand his communication, and once we eventually did, we found that music was one of the tools that we used to enter into his world, and for him to enter into our world, and it reduced his frustrations. He's very, very rhythmic. His musical ability is quite unique, because as well associated with his autism, he has perfect pitch, and his rhythm is, as I said, always spot on. And he's been able to really join in, or we've been able to join into his life really through using
music,
rhythm, sound, and music. So yes, and so he's my first son, and it was him really that I suppose, as I said, spoke earlier about the change in the trajectory of my life. Yeah.
And we'll come on to that in a bit, but I just wanted to know, I hear you speak about your mom and how she was, integral in, taking care of
Oh, she was
everything.
amazing. Yes, my mother, and yeah, she still is. Should I talk a bit more about my mom? Is that what you?
Yeah. Let me know a bit more about your mom, but I also wanted to know who, apart from your mom, who else have been of an influence in you growing up and
Yes,
becoming who you
lovely.
are.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got to think really far back, obviously. But my mother was and is amazing woman. As I said, she was very much. She encouraged us in whichever way. She knew all of our individual abilities and skills, and she really tried to encourage it as much as she could. She taught us the importance. The key thing my mum taught us really was to understand and know who we were. Most of all, as I said at the beginning, being a child of God is really important, because having that firm foundation directs the rest of your life. If you know that you are a child of God, and therefore life will throw all sorts of things at you, but if you know that He is the bedrock, then everything actually works to his favor and to His purpose. And so I think that's really shaped a lot of what I've done and a lot of how I engage with the world. So I think she's also she's also very creative person, as I said before, very impactful, and she was also very much into education. She was always studying. I suppose that's what we're always studying, and she would always encourage us to study and to do well. Not just because she felt that, she would always say, "Do the best that you can," and we always did the best that we could. So I think my mother was very much significant in that. I think my father also was very much played a major impact. He was a film producer, director, again, very, very creative, very, very outgoing, and, liked to be amongst people. And I think for me, that might be where I've got my love of people. I love being amongst people and engaging and just making sure that people are happy. I like hospitality. I like making sure people come to my home. I want to make sure that they're well catered for. And also in the, I think, the jobs and the role that I've taken, one of the things that my mother, going back to my mother again, has really instilled in us is the importance of justice and making sure that people who are on the outside are brought in. And I think I have that natural ability. I do feel I feel I want to advocate for people.
Yeah.
And I do spend a lot of time, not only in the area of disability, but if there are any other areas that I feel very strongly about, and if I can use my voice, then I will do so. So yeah, I think that's my mother, my father. Other people that have impacted my life. My grandmother, I didn't talk about her. She was also a very strong person. I think that's probably where I got the hospitality from. She liked and always did. In fact, as a family, we've always had people in the house. As growing up as a child, especially on a Sabbath. This is a Sabbath worship.
Yeah.
Each day that we worship. And on a Sabbath after the service, midday service, we would have hundreds of people in our house. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course.
But
the house was always full. It was always open, and always spending time, with people of our age. Yeah, very, very much so. I think the church generally has impacted who I am. So yes, I'm just trying to think if there's any individual person growing up as a child.
Probably in school, in your education.
Yeah,
that stood out for your teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yes, I think there was one teacher. Yes, there was. And he was my biology teacher. Actually, now it's interesting you mentioned that, because I never thought about that, but I think it definitely was him. And so initially I struggled with biology, and I don't know why, but when eventually, he was a fantastic teacher, and the way that he made you think about things really helped me understand. And what he always used to say, and I believe this, and I always say this to whoever I have an opportunity to teach or to educate,
right,
is once you understand something, once you understand the root of something, you can cram as much as you like, but if you don't understand what it is you're learning, then no matter what you can have every exam and you can pass it, but it doesn't really make an impact on your life. You have to really have a root, true understanding. And once I learned that, everything fell into place. And I started to love biology because I started to understand things more. So much so, as I said, not only did I do pretty well in biology, but I went on to do the profession that I went to, which is podiatry, and then went on to physiology, which is I absolutely love that topic as well, because what physiology does, it teaches you, because I love so many things I do love to do and talk about, but I particularly like to talk about health and understanding, I suppose, as that is my profession, I'm working in health at the time, understanding how the body functions and how when things go wrong, having to understand why things have gone wrong, when you understand what's going on in the body, i.e. at the real physiological level, if that all makes sense.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, you're talking, you help making me talk about topics that I really enjoy.
Well, this is what it is all about, impact. We have conversation that, thinks back and look back at how things have impacted. And I'm just listening to you, your grandmother, your mother, your parents, how that hospitality, of being hospitable to people have passed on. And then your teacher who impacted you in terms of what they said to you and how they treated you. I know you in the education, did you pass that on in your role as an educator?
Absolutely. And I remember, as I said, topic of physiology can seem really difficult, but once you understand and you create pictures and images, I believe very much in the power of, when it comes to education, not to telling, but to drawing out. I believe that, even a young person at university has got something to offer. They're not empty cups. Yeah. And once you can find out where they are in whatever topic is you're talking about, and then take them to the next level, shall we say. And also, I'm sure you've heard the saying that says, give a man a fish.
Yeah.
As opposed to a fishing rod. And I use that quite a lot, not only in my own understanding. If I'm challenged about something, I want to go down to the root to understand. But if I remember again talking about my mother, as a child, I probably used to find it annoying, but actually not only do I use it myself, but it makes so much sense, where I would ask her a question and she would say, oh, have a look in the dictionary, or have a look there, or she would never ever give me the answer.
Yeah.
And that has given me, I suppose, the thirst for knowledge. I'm always looking and seeking and wanting to know more, and because I feel it just not only does it change my life, but also the people that I come into contact with. Both in the role that I have and have had working as an educator, but also a facilitator of conversations. That's something I really enjoy doing, being able to bring people to a place of I suppose that's also part of how I coach as well.
Yeah.
People to a place of understanding that they're brought from themselves, because it's there. You just need to know to ask the right questions. So
and in your role as a coach and as an educator, it's about life experience, because you're teaching from what has helped you and move you on. And one of the things I always tell my students is that what I teach is not important, is what you learn is the most important thing. And I think that goes back to what you're saying there. So you have had these impactful people, your mother, your grandmother, your teacher, your biology teacher, and you have come into the world doing the same. But as you have mentioned earlier, life took a change in with your son.
Absolutely. So I talk a lot about transitions.
Yeah.
As you get older in life, but also as a child, everything that happens to us in life is some form of a transition. And how you can make a decision about how you engage with that transition. You can decide to look at it as a real negative, and it can pull you down, or you can look at it as an opportunity. And for us, my husband and I, we saw a number of opportunities that we decided to walk through. I have a podcast that I call Opening Closed Doors, and I think going through doors sometimes and closing doors behind you is really important in life. So my son was born, Matthew. This is my firstborn, was, as I said before, with a condition called Peter's anomaly, which resulted in his being blind. But as he got older, we realized he had disabilities. He had cognitive disabilities. And for us, as I mentioned earlier, church was a major part of our life. And as he got older, he developed what's called sensory processing disorders. So sounds were really difficult for him. Being in company of people was difficult, and he couldn't sit down quietly like we normally find in church today.
Yes.
So we would go to a church, and we would find that the membership really struggled, I think, to appreciate. We're talking now back in the 1990s or so, because he was born 1996. And from 1996 to about 2000, it was a challenge, to be honest. And it got to the point where we decided we weren't going to go to church with him, because the members were they found it hard to see that there could be somebody who couldn't sit down quietly. And I think there was also a lot of judging that was going on. And I think it's a lot of what I put down now to share lack of understanding, lack of awareness, ignorance in a sense. But something happened to us at the year 2000, where we went to something that was called the General Conference within Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that experience really changed our outlook on where we felt the church was really struggling. And what happened was there were over 65,000 Adventists there. And we went to the Children's Sabbath School at the time. And there was a little notice on the door which says, "We don't cater for children with special needs." And we thought, okay. I'm sure they put that sign up there just because they felt they wanted people to realize that they weren't going to cater. But of course, we had a child with special needs. And so we thought, are we the only family in the whole of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that had a child with special needs? And actually, in churches, we didn't see people with special needs. We didn't see other children. We didn't see other adults. We saw just our family. Now, we engaged quite a lot with our local community outside of the church, and we met other families that had children with special needs, but we just didn't see, in a place where we felt people should feel welcome and they should feel understood. So we decided, my husband and I, to find out whether we were the only ones, and we put we wrote our story in what was called, which was a national newsletter that went across the churches in the UK, called The Messenger. And within a couple of weeks, we put our details on there and said, if anybody's experiencing this, get in touch with us. Does anybody else have a child out there with special needs, or any other people with special needs? And within a couple of weeks, we got a few people contacting us, and we realized actually that this was something that hadn't been mentioned before. People just didn't talk about disability. So we decided we would come together with other families and start an association, which we called the Adventist Special Needs Association. And we had two main focuses. One was to raise the awareness of people within our church, but also in our local community, people that lived with additional needs, neurodiversities, people with physical disabilities, but most importantly, people with cognitive disabilities, because I think that was where the challenge was the most. Our members didn't really understand, didn't appear to understand, about conditions like autism or learning disabilities. And our son, Matthew, had severe learning difficulties. He also was autistic and had sensory processing disorders. And therefore, the way that people like my son engage with the world is very different to everyone else. So our main focus was to provide training and awareness. And we're still doing that even up till today, really just to sensitize our membership and also to help our church address some of the ignorances, the lack of understanding. And the main focus, therefore, is to what we describe as to make the gospel accessible and to create places of belonging so that everybody can feel that they belong. The other focus that we have with the charity is to provide direct support to families like ours. So as a family, we felt very alone in our church. We thought, as I said, we were the only ones. But when we started to meet up with other families, and they would say, "Oh, wow, it's great that this organization has been set up, because now I know I'm not on my own." And it makes a major difference to families to know that you are not on your own, and also that somebody cares. And when you come together, you put your voices together, and actually things aren't as difficult as it. I mean, things will always be difficult, but you can support each other. There are a couple of things that people often felt in the church, and one of them, and this is something that we really wanted to address, one of them was a lot of people felt that there was something that they had done which resulted in them having And this often tended to make people feel guilty, feel ashamed, not know that God really loves them, and God isn't answering their prayers, because they were often told, if you pray hard enough, you get a cure. But actually, there's a difference between a cure and healing. We really, really wanted to encourage our churches to be places of healing for people, spiritual healing, people who do feel that there's something that they've done wrong. But actually, when we read the Bible, especially John, the book of John, chapter 9, it tells us there, that powerful story, the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned? Who is it that sinned? And he said, no, neither of them sinned. But a lot of families do feel, unfortunately, because of the way that the experience that they've had within their church community, they're told that you need to pray. And if you pray hard, your healing will come. And they're talking about cure as opposed to healing. So that was the other thing we really wanted to do, provide places where families can come together and feel that they are loved, that they are blessed, that they're places for belonging, and that God loves them and the person that they have with special needs is really key to be able to do that. So that's the two main things that the charity was set up to do.
No, that's really important thing that you're doing, and your story, having started that. I was thinking of a very famous gentleman, Nick Vujicic,
Yes.
without limbs, and how he has been an integral part using his disability to spread the gospel, to share. And sometimes as your podcast talk about open and closed doors, sometimes some doors are closed, some doors are open, and it's about how we use those opportunity to move forward. And without that experience, probably there would be no ASNA, would it?
You hit the nail on the head, Craig. I'm very careful about how I say that, because if I was to say to somebody else who has a similar situation, they might find that a little bit challenging. But actually, the life that we lead, we can, as I said at the beginning, as I said when I was talking about this, you can make a decision about using this as an opportunity to further God's work, or use it as an opportunity to just sit and be unhappy, because there are many who are unhappy. And listen, I don't want anyone to think in any shape or form that this journey has been easy. It's not easy, but what has made it lighter, or at least more bearable, is knowing that firstly that God is right there, and that you're not on your own. You're journeying with him, but also you're journeying with other members, within your community. And I very much believe that, as a strong woman of faith, believe in the creation, that when God created us, he created us to be in community. He created us to be with others. Being on your own. I mean, research has shown actually that isolation is the impact of isolation is worse than cancer or heart disease. And so we are designed to be together. Think about people who have disabilities on their own. So we're designed to be in community, to help each other, to work with each other, because and also this, I want to mention this, that people with additional needs and disabilities, they're not there for a pity party or for a prayer party. They are also there to give and to be impactful. Matthew has changed my life, my son, and changed so many other people's lives. Interestingly enough, he has people that support him, and he goes to church every Sabbath, and they come along with him, and they are enjoying the service with him. I mean, he's being a witness more so than some of us, So I think really it is really what Matthew has done in my life and the life of others. It has really shown who God is in a really true and vulnerable way, let's say, and has caused my husband and I not only to come closer to each other, but also to him, knowing that we need God virtually in everything that we do. And I that has really been that's an important part of my life and has taken us through on our journey.
I want to just think back on, when this started in the 90s, and, you having to deal with the church wasn't ready and couldn't cope, and you find it struggling. And I think there's, just let me ask you, do you think as a church we have moved on far enough? And also, how have you seen it in other religion where disability is concerned? Is there something similar to ASNA, or how do they cope with that?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Craig, because I think back in the in the 90s, say when we started the charity 2000, there was a lot of ignorance, especially in the churches. And as an organization, ASNA, we decided that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So we did do that very thing. We looked to see whether there were we didn't see anything in the Adventist church. Specifically geared to this ministry. Let me refrain. There was definitely something that had been going on for a number of years called the Special Needs Camp that the Seventh Adventist Church was running. Yes, I need to mention that. Joy Busey set that up many years ago. And that's been going for a number of years. The challenge we had with that was that it was only really dealing with adults at the time, and it ran once a year, and it was great as a break for families, and that was excellent. What we felt was that there was a need for something ongoing, and we also felt there needed to be education within the church. Mm-hmm. So as well as having that as a wonderful resource, we felt that there was a real need within the church to really challenge, or I don't want to use the word challenge, I suppose the word I'm looking for is to facilitate a conversation that addresses some of the unspoken things, some of the things like the stigma. So when we went into a church, we created spaces for that conversation to be had. And I think we felt and that started, I would say, in 2000, year 2000. That's when we launched the charity in 2001. And right the way up until, say, 2012, it was a struggle, but there were things that were happening at the time within the world, I suppose, really. Maybe not so much. Yeah, actually, yes, it probably was globally, because if you remember, there was the Paralympics that happened in 2012, and that really, I suppose, brought a bit of better understanding of how people saw people with special needs and other neurodiversity disability. There are pros and cons for that. I should be careful, but we engage with a lot of other charities out there, in Christian charities, that were doing some really good work. And I would mention one here called Through the Roof. We work very closely with them, and they helped us in the whole training element. There's another charity at the time. It's changed slightly now, but there were a number of other organizations. There's a whole sort of umbrella organization called Churches for All, and that consists of at least 6 or 7 or more charities that are set up specifically to work within the church, the Christian community, to raise awareness and most of all to create places of belonging. So in answer to your question with respect to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I think it's been, there've been pockets. Let me put it that way. There are pockets of really good practice. Mm-hmm. Some churches you go to and you feel very, very welcome. They understand and they know. There has been, I think there's definitely an awareness. There's been an increase in awareness. I'm going to definitely say that. I suppose the challenge comes with, because, as you know, there's always change in administration, there's change in church leadership. And if you get a church where you've got a leader that really sees the importance of this, you see a real increase in that work. But if it's put at the bottom of the pile, which often it is, unfortunately, then there is a challenge. The administration, I'm thinking now about the Seventh Adventist Church administration, have really, back in 2007, saw the need for this and set up a department within the British Union. But guess what? The General Conference now have set up a department.
Okay.
And it's been over, I can't remember exactly. It was 2015, that's right, where it was actually a change within the guidance. The Seventh Adventist Church have a manual, as you know, and they've created a department that's called the Possibility Ministry Department. I have got comments on that, right. But what it has done, I'm not going to talk about the title. What it has done is it has increased again. It has increased not only awareness, but it has made it a prerequisite that every union within the global church has to have a representative for this ministry, and the president himself.
Yeah.
Of the General Conference has. I remember back in 2015, where his closing speech, he mentioned the importance of this ministry. So, there has been change. But if you were to go to a local church and ask the question, there is still a lot to be done. And Craig, if I'm honest, there is still a lot to be done. And I just think it will always be a need. Let me give you an example. Obviously, before I had my son, I was aware of people with special needs because in my profession I was treating people and what have you.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I was cognizant of people with special needs. It wasn't until I had my son that suddenly a completely new world opened up to me. And that's why we set up the charity, to try to open up the world to others. And so you almost have to have a connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember going to a church and, at first they didn't really have any interest until they realized actually, yeah, this could happen to us at any time. It's not them out there. We can be.
I get that, because I remember, when my daughter was born and I started traveling with her, that is when I get more aware of children on airplane and the crying and so forth. And you're accepting of that before, maybe I'm sleeping on the plane, but people get thinking that noise. And I think, thinking back to what you're doing and the experience you talk about in terms of how churches are adopting to it, is it that a lack of training for leaders, or is it the government policies that are put in place for special needs that are those making a difference?
That's again, excellent questions. I think back in 20, so I think it was 2012, where at the time it was called the Disability Discrimination Act. It's changed now to the Reporters Act. And during that time, I think our church recognized that actually we are providing a service and there is massive gaps in what we do, both in the two main, I always talk about the two barriers that limit people with special needs to access the gospel. The first barrier is that of the environment.
Yeah.
You've got an environment where there's steps and people use a wheelchair, you can't get upstairs, or there's sometimes the environment where there's probably lots of noise for children with autism or sensory processing disorder. Sometimes the music can be very loud. The whole sort of environment can be challenging. But the greatest barrier often is just the attitude, the attitude of the members, because you just need to sometimes just switch your thinking.
Yeah.
And that's why we make every effort to do as much training. We try and encourage the church. We find that the greatest impact, talking about impact, is when we go to a church and we not only share our story, but we enable the church to allow their members to share their story. And then members think, oh, wow, I didn't really realize. And it just, light bulbs go on and they change their behavior. I think for us, that's where our greatest impact is, when we're able to create a space, a safe space where people can talk about their experience. We talk about ours quite openly. They talk about their experience. And then other members in the church think, wow, okay, I didn't realize when I did this, it caused this or that, so yes, training is really, really, really key on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders, I think, again, they have a lot of other pressures, shall we say. But when the government, as they brought in this law, they had to make a difference. And that's really when they set up the ministry. At the time, it was called Disability Ministry, and I was involved in that back in 2012, 2013. Eventually, I was made the director for disability diversity within the South England Conference. And I could see the impact that was being made. But as you know, things move on, things change. But I feel, though, one of the things that we do through ASNA as well, talking about the Adventist Church, because I'm sure there are other churches that also are doing similar things, although maybe not as we are, is to create what we call, at the time they were disability ministry champions. And so what we're doing with ASNA is looking to develop the champion network, so that there are people who have a passion for this ministry, and it's not something that will change every year or every 2 years. It will be someone who has a passion for the ministry and who champions the cause not only in their church but also in their local community, and that's a real strategy, shall we say, looking at making a difference in people's lives.
So how people listening to us now and watching this podcast, what are the things, are the steps that are needed to make make things better, as from your point of view for ASNA, not only just in the church but in local communities or just in general, where people can be more aware of special needs and disabilities and support that.
That's a big, big question, because the way I've understood the question is, what can churches do to make places of belonging? What can communities do, and what can we do as a charity? So what we're doing as a charity, as much as possible, whenever we're given space, is we raise the awareness, both through our own stories and the stories of others within the charity, because it's a small user-led charity, but we kind of punch above our weight, in the sense that we whenever we get a space to really raise the banner, we do that. What I say to churches about engaging with families and people in the community, or just generally, how can you make your church more a place where people feel that they belong? I always say, I talk about these three pillars. Three pillars, either of engaging with families or just engaging with the ministry. The first pillar is to recognize diversity, i.e., but people with disabilities, they're all different. People often try to lump everybody with disabilities together. Let's put on a program for people with disabilities. Let's start a church for people with disabilities. Let's start a ministry for people. Well, actually, people with disabilities are like everybody else. They're just different. So I always say, always remember diversity or difference. Everybody is different. And so therefore, whatever you want to engage in, you will look at people individually, uniquely. The second is the importance of developing relationships with people with additional needs. So key. It's really important. You can never know about my son, Matthew, unless you spend time with us as a family, or speak with carers, get to know them, because again, it will help you understand about them, and also will help you decide on what is needed in not only in their lives but also in the life of the church. That's really, really key. Relationship building is important. And then the third thing, which I think, Craig, you'll like, is to think outside of the box. Be flexible in the way that you develop whatever it is you do within your church, and be creative. Don't be afraid to do things differently. People often think that we have to do things in the same way all the time, and then we're thinking, how can we then involve people? Well, everybody's different, and I can guarantee you, if you do things differently, not only people with additional needs will enjoy it, but the membership will enjoy it. So I think that's what I always say about churches making difference in their church. And then the local community, I say, open your eyes, because there are people there. It's difficult for you to bring people into your church community if the space is not conducive, if it's not a safe space. So I say, go out, go and meet people. There are places where people are desperate for friendships. So I think about, again, to my son, and think about the number of friends that he have. I think about my other son, who's got friends galore, speed out, YouTube. And I'm not just talking about friends that you have online, but, his actual contact friends, flesh friends, shall we say. And there are many people with additional needs, adults. I'm thinking now, because obviously children is not so difficult to find them connections, but adults with special needs that would love connection and friendship with others. Remember, I said earlier that we were designed to be in community. I think this is really important. I feel if a church can really open up their eyes and look into their community and see where these places, where they can be God, where they can be a God-filled inspiration person in wherever they go, really. I think, because that's our purpose. That's what we're here for, to be able to create spaces where people can see, there is something better than what I'm experiencing. There's somebody here who is showing me who God is. And just sitting with someone with additional needs, just being there, sitting next. My son loves when you just sit next to him, you rub his head or just hold his hand. It just creates a sense of belonging, of warmth, of purpose. So yes, you asked me those questions, and I
No. As I listen to you, I'm just thinking the key word there is just care and caring for others, and it doesn't matter. And you're right. I always say that we all have a disability. We all have the fact that you and I are wearing our glasses. That's a disability for us to see better, and we have to cater for all those different needs that we come in contact with. As we draw closer to the end of this podcast, I just want to think about where do you see ASNA? I know you talk about small charities punched above your weight, but where do you see ASNA in the next 5, 10 years, and what sort of support is needed to even make it bigger?
We'd love to see that every single church, at least within the Adventist circles, has got a passion and a mission to ensure that they have created a place of belonging where everybody feels they belong, but specifically people with special needs. We'd like to feel that people within not only the Adventist circles, but even outside, if you are a family member with disability, if you are a member with disability, that you're not alone. We feel very strongly that people should not feel that they're alone. And I think to achieve that, what we're doing at the moment is, as I said, we have these programs that we run, residential breaks, etc. We'd love to feel that we have kind of multiply ourselves, and that we within the UK at least, that we have not only regional ASNA spaces, but maybe even more local. I know within our church and some other organisations, they work within the system of the church, so their areas, for example.
Yeah.
We'd like to feel that if we're talking about the Advent Church, that there is champions in every area, and that in 5 years' time, that those hubs, shall we say, are resourced well, that people can go to those hubs and feel supported, and that people, wherever you are, you're not alone and you are trained. Because those are the two things that we aim to do. People don't feel that they're alone, and that they are trained and have education. It's a journey.
It's a journey, but you're willing to go to make it happen. I just want to know if somebody listening now, watching, what are some of the events that you have and how they can get involved if they are, a part of that system or criteria that fits?
Absolutely. So you can get involved as a volunteer. Desperately keen to have volunteers involved in the work that we do, and that volunteering will be needed for the events that we run. So just to mention maybe 2 or 3. One, we run residential breaks. That's usually over a long weekend. That's where all families come together with additional needs, with volunteers and with people who want to be trained. And it's a spiritual weekend and physical. The aim is to develop people in whichever way is needed. And often it's health. Carers need support for their own personal health. Being a carer myself, I know what it's like, where you're caring 24/7 for somebody with special needs. So we try to make that family break such that they get a break. It may not be totally, but they get a break. So that's one. We run that usually in the spring. In the October time, we run one specifically for carers, residential break for carers who can come on their own. And we run a lot of health workshops, and also again about making connections. We believe in the power of connecting people. In the summer, we have something called, we've joined with an organisation called Parallel Lifestyle, and they run it's called the Parallel. At the minute, it's being held in Windsor, so it's called Parallel Windsor, and we go along, and it's like a fun day for us, really. We encourage our members to come along, and anybody with a special needs, they have a strapline which says "Start together, finish whenever," because there are races, there are activities, and we really need volunteers to help us in that. But we also run something called the Gospel Train, which is a music workshops for families with special needs. My son is heavily involved in that, and so we encourage people to come along. We run training right throughout the whole of the year. And we provide resources. And really, if you want to know what we're doing, check out our website.
And that website is
www.asna.info. www.asna.info. And all of our details are on there.
Okay. And if people might not be able to volunteer or to be a part of those, and is there something like, being able to give respite or donations?
Donations are always welcome. Most certainly. We do have a membership system as well. So if people want to become members, that's really helpful. And again, that's on the website. But if you also want to donate, then it's the website www.asna.info/donate. And that will take you straight to our donation page, where we really want people to ideally either directly into our account, but we would love people to become members, and so we have regular subscriptions, and we call them partners, because without without those funds from from the people, our partnership, without those partnerships, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So we would love people to become partners with ASNA and to change people's lives, because that's what we want to do. We want to change lives for the better, connecting people, changing lives.
And that's what we're all about, making that impact and making a difference to people's life. Now, as we come to an end, Sophia, you talk about, you being a full-time carer. So my question to you, what do you do when you're not caring, when you're having fun?
Yes, so I said I was a full-time carer. My son now, he's 20, coming up for 20. He just turned 28, actually. He's in supported living, which is working out really well. It was a challenge at the beginning, but now it's amazing. It's changed his life. It's changed our life, and then I would encourage any carer, when your children as they get older, to really think about, because that was always on the back of my mind. What's going to happen to my son Matthew when I can't care for him anymore? So now he's in a really good place. So what I'm actually doing at the moment is I'm studying. I'm doing an MA in theology. I feel very strongly in wanting to understand better, and also to share better, what the gospel says about how we can be better places of belonging. How can we develop a community where the Holy Spirit can help us as a community to lift everybody to a space where we all feel that we can develop a relationship with God, and I'm really enjoying that at the moment. And as I said before, the coaching is also there, but it's kind of on a pause. But hobby-wise, I love to sing. And so if I get a chance to sing, I will sing. I love reading. But if I'm really honest, I think my greatest passion is gardening. I love to be in the garden, because it teaches me so much about life. Teaches me about the importance of nurturing a seed and watching that seed grow. That's, I know you love children and talk a lot about children. As individuals, if we can create spaces or environments where our seeds, i.e. our children, the people that we come into contact with, can grow, that's the best thing ever. And so I love being in the garden. You can ask my husband, I can spend a whole day just being in the garden. We were placed in a garden, so that makes sense.
We have something there in common. Whenever I get a chance, I just got an allotment which I'm developing for children, and it's amazing. Somebody said to me that would be my second wife, but
yeah, they do call them. Yes, people do talk about them being wives and what have you.
No, that's great, and you're not. I can see, when you say you're doing your MA in theology, I can see you're now going to make another a transition, I guess, to make sure that, as I asked earlier, and about the training of leaders in that space, to make sure that you are the light, or the light bearer, to make sure disabilities and special needs and just that word belonging is really taken into consideration in terms of ministry.
Absolutely, particularly that word belonging. I believe very much in that, and I'm learning a lot more about, because I've always had a bit of a challenge when we use the word inclusion. What do you mean by include? Who's doing the including? I do feel we need to go a bit beyond that, and to a place of creating spaces where people feel that I belong here, and the power, I suppose, of the body of Christ, our community, not only so much the church is the body of Christ. When people feel that they could be, the Bible talks about us all having different abilities. There is something there. Somebody with a disability also is part of that body and has got something to offer. And so we all need to feel that we can belong to this body. And so that's something that I really want to do further, research into. And how can we, by recognizing that we are part of the body of Christ, if we all are part of the body of Christ, how can we ensure that our ministry and as leaders, we are creating those spaces with that recognition? So, yeah.
Right. So just so make sure that we can get in touch, or how can we get in touch with you apart from your website, any other contact, social media?
Yes, so me personally, Sophia, I have got a LinkedIn page. People can contact me on LinkedIn, just Sophia Nicholls will come up. I also have my own personal website as well. Sophia Nicholls is my website, and that is mainly do most of my coaching and things through that. But also I usually haven't for a while, have a blog that I put out there. And I have got, I must be honest, I do also have an Instagram page. And I think I developed that more during the time of COVID because I did quite a lot on I don't know if you know about Clubhouse, but so Clubhouse is another medium where I spend a lot of time sort of running seminars and webinars. So ideally, the best way to contact me is probably through LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have you do? I know you do a fundraising concert.
Yes. So now we're talking about the charity now.
Yep.
ASNA, we run a concert the end of every year, usually the first Saturday evening in December, and we yes, they're usually held in Bracknell, Newbold College, and I should say that these concerts are quite unique in that they're not just concerts for, that they are include. There's that word. Everybody feels that they belong in the concert. So we have people with additional needs taking part. We have people who in some way have got some connection with a disability, where they wouldn't normally have a space where they can sing or they can show their talent, showcase their talent, and really feel that they're also engaging in ministry. So that's really why we set those concerts up. They are very much an everybody is welcome kind of concerts. Yeah, and we're always looking for donations because of the fundraising concerts.
Yes. So as we end, I'll give you the last word. What would you say to somebody who is out there listening, watching, and might think, might not be aware of special needs, might think that they have it and they're ashamed? What is your last word to any such person?
I think that the last word to them is recognize, first of all, that you're a child of God. That's my word to you. No matter what your situation you're in, you're a child of God. And because of that, therefore, you are loved. And by being loved, you have a purpose. No matter what your situation is, you have a purpose. It's just a case of finding it. For us, we had our son, Matthew. Our purpose was to be able to engage in this world and to make an impact on the world in this way. So you have a purpose, and therefore you will make an impact.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You have an impact. I just want to thank you, Sophia, for spending the time sharing with us, sharing your life and sharing your story, and letting us know all the amazing work you're doing to make a difference to those, especially with special needs, but just for people to know that they belong. Just want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I've very much enjoyed being here. Thank you for being such a wonderful host.
Thank you. And thank you for listening and being with us. And I hope to see you, look forward to seeing you in our next episode. So until then, see you. Bye.